I want to first discuss about officiating and refs in the NHL. It's been a topic of conversation for a while now, but at least through the most of this season, through the start of this season, where people are talking about players drawing penalties, officiating, critiques. Are we calling enough? Should we be calling more? What do we call, et cetera, et cetera? So what I want to start with here is back in like the 70s and the 80s, when the NHL was growing, but it was on the same level as baseball or the NFL or the NBA was kind of slowly, progressing its way as well, like the NHL. But, back in the 70s and 80s, the NHL was more rinky-dink, shall I say. There was no official jersey manufacturer of the NHL in the 70s, 80s, even 90s, really. There was no national TV contract in the US. So Gretzky and Lemieux and all those guys didn't have a national spotlight on them in the US, at least, on not cable. What's the other? Well, cable and just basic TV. They didn't have that deal in the US throughout the 80s. And there were a few arena sponsors back then. Like, there used to be Northland Gardens in Edmonton, Rogers, or not Rogers, now it's Rogers, but Pacific Coliseum in Vancouver. It used to be the Forum in LA. And now that's all changed. And this included, I feel like, refs. Not to say that refs were rinky-dink, but how they officiated a game was different back then. The refs back in the day were mostly there as bodyguards to, prevent, a serious melee or brawl. And even though we still got a bunch of that, that's kind of where the refs were utilized in terms of just, preventing things from, getting too serious or breaking out. They would make calls, but it's not like it is right now. And Cyclone Taylor, the great Cyclone Taylor, who was one of the first hockey stars back in the early 1900s. Cyclone Taylor talked about how the players would get pregame talks from refs explaining how the game would go, or if so-and-so, if you, number 28, if you're going to be a pain in the ass again, you're going to get an early call. And he mentioned about how, he talked about this in his biography, which is a great read, by the way. I'd highly suggest taking a look. He talked about how this created a bond and a mutual respect between players and refs. It's that you got to know this person, you got to meet this person, you got to see this person, and this person was an authority figure, and you had a respect for this authority figure because they were also doing a job. They were getting paid. They were a referee. So, and as time went on, they just got rid of that. They don't have those pregame meetings anymore with refs and players, understanding how the game's going to go, even at a lower level. I never had a ref come into our dressing room before a game, purely because we just didn't do that. We weren't, we weren't friends with the refs. We didn't know the refs. It's kind of a, taboo thing to have a ref going into a team's locker room pregame. But now, since Bettman has taken over the NHL, now since Bettman has been commissioner of the NHL, the league has become this billion-dollar business. Like, now Adidas is the official jersey manufacturer of the NHL. The NHL is on ESPN, ABC, TNT. They have national channels, a national US TV contract deal. Almost every arena in the NHL is sponsored. I mentioned how, it used to be Pacific Coliseum. Now it's Rogers Arena. Used to be Northland Gardens in Edmonton. Now it's Rogers Place. Used to be the Great Forum in LA. Now it's, was Staples Center. Now it's going to be Crypto.com Arena. Like, the league has become such a business now, and has become so, financially dependent. Like, they're now a billion-dollar industry. That's what the NHL is, purely from increased revenues. And a lot of the stuff, while the league is still not as successful or as popular as it should be or as it could be, it hasn't really changed officiating that much. Think of the major changes that have happened to referees over the last 20, 30, 40 years. They now wear helmets. They have official uniforms. They get their first class flights. They're flying with teams in some occasions, most occasions. So, and in terms of how an official calls a game, it's tighter, but it's still this, you got to let them play. You got to let them, boys will be boys, guys will be guys, going after one another. And there's not this kind of respect or attitude for treating officials like or refereeing or linesmen. There's not the attitude of treating that like $1 billion business, like everything else has in the NHL. And it's noticeable. It's noticeable when it comes to playoffs. It was noticeable Sunday when the Leafs played the Jets. It's been noticeable in other games this year and other missed calls. So I don't like what I'm saying here is that while the league has progressed and it's still far away from where it should be from being successful and to be, truly a top tier sport, a top tier league, I should say. Hockey's the best sport. NHL is the worst league. And while they have made progressions in some areas, that hasn't come in officiating. The training of officiating, I think it is declining. I feel like the respect towards officials is declining because of the fact that the NHL has not taken it as seriously. You have to remember, these officials are people too. And when you live life, when you do various different things, you're going to meet various different kinds of people. Not everybody is the same. Not everybody's going to have the same opinion or the same feeling as you do on a certain subject. However, that doesn't mean you have to hate a referee. That doesn't mean you have to dislike the referee. You can dislike what he's doing, but he's still an official. He's still a referee. So on one end, I am defending officials a little bit because it's not an easy job. It's one of the hardest jobs to do. And you get no love for it. You get no appreciation for it because you're an official. You're not, you're not for team A and you're not for team B. You're team C. You're another team. No one likes you already off the jump because you're not part of one team. And the NHL has failed to progress to put officiating in the same class as everything else in terms of being $1 billion business. And that's why we're having problems with penalties. That's why we're having problems with, players not respecting rules, players not respecting officials. I think, having something like when Cyclone Taylor talked about having the referee come into your locker room before the game. That's a small step. That's a very small step in terms of creating a more successful, sustainable officiating plan, because there is no officiating plan. There is nothing. It is just making it up as you go. It's literally like me writing some essay on something that I have no idea, where I'm just bullshitting halfway through the article or halfway through the paper because I know I need to put words in. I just don't know what any of it, means or what they actually want. It's just me not paying attention. That's kind of what the NHL officiating is, just them not really paying attention and them just like kind of throwing in like a paragraph or two in the middle of the paper because that sounds right. Like that's kind of where we're at. So once the NHL starts treating officials and referees like $1 billion business, then they'll get more respect. Then the league will get more respect. But in the meantime, because everything else has progressed, while officials haven't, because the NHL probably doesn't respect the officials as much as, they do making money. Because the officials don't make them money. The officials don't generate revenue for the NHL. They're an expense. They cost money. You have to pay officials to ref these games. That's I think where the NHL is seeing this. But hey, we'll see if the NHL actually does something. I hope they do something sooner rather than later, but who knows for sure.